Two things I would like to talk about today. First is going to be how to know when it's time to get a new laptop. And the second will be just around the rules of registering a .au domain name. So we repair a lot of laptops in our computer shop, and about once or twice a week we would have a laptop in with a cracked screen. That's usually, if the laptop's not too old, that's worth doing a repair on, because the screens are usually reasonably priced compared to the cost of a brand new laptop. So we do quite a few of those. However, once the laptop gets beyond 3 years, and definitely once it gets to that sort of 4-5 year mark, it's much less usual that we would be doing any sort of significant repair on a laptop. Partly because if you've got a laptop which is 4 or 5 years old, you can probably get a brand new one for under $1,000, which exceeds the speed and specifications of your current laptop. And so, for every laptop that we would have in for a repair, I reckon we would send at least one or two straight back out, or not even get them to come in with them, simply because of the age of the laptop and the kind of problem that they're having. So some examples would be, if you've cracked out the socket on the side where the power cable goes into, and that doesn't work anymore and the laptop doesn't turn on, then that can be quite difficult to fix, because you can damage the actual part of the motherboard where it connects into. And it may be possible to fix, but by the time you pay for an hour or two of a technician's time and parts, and then that might not be all that's broken, if your laptop is, a brand new cheap laptop can replace it, then I wouldn't want to spend, who wants to spend $250 repairing a laptop which you can get a brand new equivalent one for like $400 or $500? So that's a common kind of problem. If the laptop does not turn on anymore, and it's not the power supply that's broken, and it's not the battery that's flat, and you get absolutely nothing from the laptop, it's probably not going to be just the switch. More likely to be like the actual power circuit inside the laptop, and again, after 3 or 4 years, that's going to be expensive to change out and probably not worth doing it. I guess it basically comes down to, it would be nice to say, yep, let's repair every computer we have. But after about 3 years, it also becomes a problem of who's sort of responsible for other things that go wrong. And it's the same with desktop computers. So if you have a computer that comes in, and maybe the problem is that there's some files on the hard drive that are corrupt, and Windows needs to be sort of reinstalled or something like that. So okay, let's assume that your computer technician does that, and they reinstall Windows on your computer, which now has, it's a 3-year-old hard drive, and the motherboard's 3 years old, and all these things, power supply is 3 years old. Okay, so you reinstall Windows, and turns out 6 months later, same problem happens. Maybe not even 6 months. And then who is responsible for that fault? Okay, so sorry about that. You're going to blame the computer technician because the same thing's happened again, even though maybe you should have replaced the hard drive. Or what if something else goes wrong and power supply dies? Now, a sensible person will say, well, it's not the computer technician's fault that happened, right? It's these computers, things break. But I would say, we've had people who would try and sort of say, well, maybe because, it was working fine until you touched it, this has gone wrong, or whatever. And there's that real problem. If you pull a computer apart, something might not work properly after you put it back together again. Like maybe the graphics card, if you're taking the graphics card out, and some reason the motherboard's maybe not quite working very well, and there's just something goes wrong. It is quite troublesome. So we're generally quite reluctant to fix older computers, unless it's something simple, like changing a DVD drive, replacing a power supply, things like that, which are pretty standard take out the old one, put a new one in. Not too big a problem. And if you are getting a new laptop, it's usually okay to get the files off your old hard drive if you don't have a backup or Dropbox or something like that. And so often what we'll find is we'll send people off to the department store, like JB Hi-Fi or Officeworks or Dick Smith or something like that. And because those shops sell the laptops often cheaper than we can even buy them for, they make all their money on the extras. I don't know if that's a big secret to anybody, but if you go and buy a laptop from a chain store, it'll be very price competitive, usually. You know, they won't be making a lot of money on the entry-level ones, that's for sure. But what they will do is they'll sell you an antivirus and make 100% markup on that, or a surge protection power board and make a 200% markup on that, or maybe a printer and cartridges, and then they'll sell you an extended warranty. And by the time you've, this $800 laptop, say, and you've bought another $300, $400 worth of stuff, maybe even more than that if you buy like Office and whatever, they've made their few $100s off the sale. They're happy, you're happy, you've got your stuff. So often we'll get people to bring their laptop in, and then we'll put the antivirus on, we'll install Office for them, transfer the files from their old computer, make sure they're happy with how it works, and a little bit of training to get used to the new version of Windows and things like that. So what can I say? If your laptop's a bit old, it might be time just to get a new one. Sad, but that's how it goes. The other thing I thought I'd bring up is the registration of domain names. Now, with an international domain name like a .com, .net, .info, .biz, .org, and some of the other ones, you can do a private registration, which means that the details on the domain registration are not your details, they're the details of the company you register it with, and it sort of shields you from spam, I guess, and people finding out who owns the domain name. With a .au domain name, so .com.au, .net.au, .org.au, asn.au, and what's the other one? .id.au. So with the Australian domain names, you can't do a private registration. There's no such thing. You can do something similar though. So if you don't want your address on the domain registration, you can put down the address of like a post office box, or you can put down the address of like your lawyer or solicitor or something, like, or your accountant. So someone else's business address that is still legitimately an address. You shouldn't really make up an address. That's kind of contrary to the rules, and you could have dramas with that in the future. An email address, well, you could go and register a Gmail account or an Outlook.com account, which is free, and you could use that as the email address if you wanted. With the one sort of thing that you really can't avoid though is putting some sort of business registration number. So normally that's an ABN, which is the government's tax number for businesses, or a company number, or a trademark number, or some other like number that is recognised and valid. Again, like probably the most likely way you could sort of shield yourself from that would be to use like the registration number for a trust, or like a corporate trust, or a trustee, or accountant or something like that. You could get your person that's registering it for you, like your web host or your web designer, to put their details on it. And occasionally we do that for people. Examples might be maybe they don't have like an address they can put down because they're moving, or they live in a place where they don't really want their mail to go to, or something like that. They don't have a post office box, so we can put our post office box on it. But you can't really avoid putting something on the ABN in the domain name. So, and you need to comply with the rules for the domain registration. You can't just put down number 1 Candy Lane, Candyville, and make up a phone number or something. You've got to put some details on there, because in theory you could lose the domain name if someone tried to contest it or tried to take it over. There's something I see which I don't know how to feel about it. Like, it's a little bit annoying, but sometimes you'll see that like a web designer will put all of their details on the domain name. And when I started building websites 10 years ago. That's basically what it did, because it seemed like the obvious thing to do at the time, and it was basically what the domain registration companies kind of encouraged it, because they would just put in the details by default, that, you know, they would just whatever details you used last time, and so you'll just let it go. But so I always try to put the actual details for the company on there, because then it's under their information. You know, if something happens and they need to take their domain name or whatever, then we don't, you know, obstruct them from doing that. I do see web designers who put like their email address and all their contact details on the domain name, and I'm not convinced that that is, I don't think it's the best way to do things. It's not like against any rules necessarily, and it could be done legitimately if that's what the customer asks for. I mean, there's no reason technically you can't do it, but if you do it and you don't tell the customer, and then, you know, they go to move their domain name and it turns out it's got all your details on it, and it can be troublesome if the web designer person goes out of business or disappears or can't be found, and then you've got to fill in all sorts of paperwork and send off, you know, a copy of your license and goodness knows what else. It just adds to the workload for the person who's trying to help that customer in the future. So just in general, you need to put the details in properly, and ideally use a registration company that answers the phone if you pick up the phone and try and call them. You know, doesn't necessarily pay to go with the cheapest. We've had couple of companies recently in Australia where they've been absorbed or dissolved because they, I don't know, they didn't have a good enough profit margin or something in their domain registrations. So, anywho, that's my couple of thoughts for the day. Have a great weekend or week or whatever it is you're doing. If you have any questions about this or anything else that you would like me to prattle on a bit about or ramble on about for a few minutes, feel free to send me an email. You can get me at mail@jezweb, jezweb.com.au, or hit us up on jezweb.com.au, or I don't know, social media or whatever, YouTube, one of those things. Or you can ring on the phone. Feel free to ask questions. Happy to have a discussion about something. So thanks very much. Looking forward to hearing from you. See ya.